I'm particularly pleased to be here tonight and to introduce the Professor of IT, Matt Jones. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Matt's credentials in case you're not aware. He is a computer scientist at Swansea University and a fellow of the British Computer Society. He works alongside colleagues from many other disciplines and directly with everyday folk across the world to explore the future of digital technologies. He currently has a fellowship from the UK Research and Innovation Foundation, which enables him to explore the future of interactive AI and leadership roles in responsible AI and inclusive digital technologies. So the topic of tonight's second lecture is Becoming AI, Your Journey to Assimilation, with a question mark. So I'm very pleased to introduce Professor Matt Jones.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you again to the Worshipful Company of IT for enabling this lecture and the series of lectures. Tonight, we're going to be seeing a number of animals. We're going to be seeing a lion, a tiger, even a ferret. Now, don't worry, you haven't accidentally come along to the lectures by the Professor of Zoology. These animals are going to help us explore a bit more our relationship or potential relationships with artificial intelligence. Now, before I go any further, could you put your hand up if you came to my first lecture, which was about 2 months ago? A few of you, welcome back. Now, those of you that didn't come, this week is the best week to join the lecture series. Now, in the first lecture, we asked the question of whether or not AI would subjugate us. Would it outpace us, outsmart us? Would it beat us? Would we soon see a world where we were no longer the most divine of creations? Would we join this fellow, Lee Sedol, a master of an incredibly intricate game called Go, who was beaten by an AI, and he felt powerless, he felt embarrassed? Would we be like the little girl and her mother who invited in the tiger, anthropomorphized it, treated as if it was one of them, only to find the tiger ate them out of house and home? Will we be like that, inviting AI into our home, talking to it as if it was human, only to find that it exploits us and extracts, and it walks away, leaving us with nothing? Now, in the first lecture, I gave, I hope, several reasons for us to be hopeful, that we can relax. We're not going to be beaten by AI. Now, we need an animal to help us perhaps recap just one of those reasons. Here's our animal. It is a ferret. If you ask a rational, optimizing, generative AI, as I have here, what ferrets can be used for, you'll get some very sensible answers. AI is great at that. So they've been used for generations for hunting. They've been used for science and even during COVID. Now, the rational AI, though, isn't like us. And what do humans do? Well, this is what we do. This is a sport, believe it or not, a sport called ferret legging. And what you do is you get a ferret and you stick it down your trousers, and then you see how long you can last. There is a world record if you want to beat it. That world record is 3 hours. 3 hours. You know, you, me, humans, we're very strange. We're curious. We're unique. We do things like that. And this is why I believe that we won't be beaten by AI. But there is another danger. I want you to pause for a moment, and I'm not going to embarrass anyone, but think back over the last 24 hours. How much of that 24 hours have you held the hand of someone else? How much time have you touched the skin of another human in the last 24 hours? Some of you smiling, looks like you have, indeed, well done. Others of us, not so much. And now consider this second question. How much time have you held in your hand this entity and stroked its sleek, dark skin, poking as you interact with digital and these days mostly artificial intelligence and machine learning systems. Again, I won't embarrass you, but if you're like me, today I've spent much longer holding this in my hand than holding the hand of my loved one. And what we're going to look at today is that perhaps our repeated interactions with these digital devices and services are going to lead us to become more like machines. So instead of worrying about AI becoming like us and beating us, I want us to consider tonight that temptation that we are drawn into the digital. Now, at first look, this proposition seems quite puzzling, doesn't it? Because AI researchers, AI developers are spending a lot of time trying to make AI to be more like us. It's most obvious, I suppose, in what's called embodied AI, robotics. A lot of robotics researchers are creating humanoid-like representations and then having digital AI infused in them. Oh, by the way, that last image that came up was produced by an Indian research team who were fed up that the only humanoid representations that they could see were westernized and weren't representing other cultures. And as an aside, that's an important point, actually. Most of today's systems, the big AI systems, are being developed and work with a very Western perspective. And there's a real need to diversify not just how AI might look, but the data that it's trained on. Now, I don't know if you saw this, but this came out, this new service launched just about a month ago. This is the Veo robot. The Veo robot will, for just $599 a month, come into your home and do chores for you. What a wonderful thing. Anyone going to subscribe for Christmas? Now, there's some really interesting things about this new commercial service, not just the subscription model it has. One of the most interesting things is that for most of the time these beings will be in your home, initially at least, they're not going to be autonomous. They're not going to be controlled fully by an AI. People, probably in the global south, using virtual reality headsets, will be manipulating these robots, a bit like virtual puppeteers. So they'll be human-controlled as they start to learn your home. And this is another point I just want to make as an aside. You know, we tend to think, don't we, that AI is amazing. It's computer algorithms, it's all this data, then there's just robotics. But today, a lot of AI depends on humans behind the scene. That book that came and then went is a really interesting book about what's called ghost workers, hidden people who are usually paid not very much to label your data, to gather the data, to moderate data. So it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. Behind that curtain, there is a human controlling all this. What about some of the systems that you're unlikely to have this thing in your home? But in your pocket or on your desktop, you probably are already using things like ChatGPT or Gemini, these large language models. And these large language models, again, are striving to be like you and I. This is a very well-cited paper from 2020, and this paper is about how to create almost human-like performance in these dialogue systems. So lots of researchers around the world really trying to think about how can we make this dialogue that you have with a machine feel and be like a human dialogue. If you jump out of research and into the commercial world, Sam Altman, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, and OpenAI produces ChatGPT. Again, just about a month ago, he said, I really want, and this isn't a tweet or an X, I really want to make sure that our next versions of our conversational system can respond to you in very human-like ways. Controversially, you can see at the bottom of that tweet, well, it's almost December now, isn't it? And he's talking about next month. He said he would like to have these conversations become more adult-like. So a real interesting twist in what Sam and OpenAI are thinking about. Now, you might be sitting there and thinking, I don't want an AI companion. But you know, there is a minority, but a growing minority of people who do. Already, and this is a very new sort of thing, right, for us in the commercial world, already there are tens of millions of active users of these companion apps. And by companion apps, they really do mean having a sort of simulated human relationship between the person and the machine. Now, this fascinates me, and also it worries me. It worries me because these things aren't human, and some real problems could arise. I'll just touch on one of them. This is another really great book that I recommend, Laura Bates. And what Laura has done is to look at the ways in which modern artificial intelligence could be amplifying and entrenching age-old sexist, misogynist attitudes and amplifying them. So, for example, she talks about this app, which you can download. I don't recommend you do. So, Eva AI. Jump into your desires with Eva AI. You can download one of these things. You can create an avatar, a virtual person, and you can have a relationship, a conversation with it. Laura, in her research, interacted with a few of these avatars, and there's just a little snippet there of a conversation she had with one of these virtual companions, highlighting potentially some of the serious impacts these sort of companions might have. Now, all of these things, the humanoid robots, these chatbots, all of them are trying to pass what Alan Turing called the imitation game. We call it the Turing test because he invented it. And just last month, the Royal Society celebrated the 75th anniversary of this very famous test. Now, I'm sure you have come across it, but if you haven't, I'll just recap it very quickly. In the Turing test, there are 3 players. You can see them here. One is a computer, player A. The other is a human, player B. And the third, player C, who can't see the 2 other players, asks questions. And the computer passes the Turing test if the interrogator can't tell the difference, can't know which one is the human and which one is the computer. Now, I've been talking for a bit, so I'm going to see how good you are at this Turing test. You ready? Oh, good. Some response. Still awake. Excellent. We're only on slide 22 of 84. 22 of 84? It's ridiculous. We will stop before tomorrow. In a moment, you're going to see some questions from a tester, and then you're going to see the answers coming from something called me. I want you to look at them and decide, is me, Matt Jones, or is it a computer? Right, ready? Here we go. Any second now. So again, the tester is a human asking a question, and the me is either me or a computer. So I'll let that sink in. I've got my son and his partner here who know me well. So I wonder, should I come to them first? No, I won't embarrass them. Put your hands up if you think me is the Matt Jones standing before you. Oh, yeah, it's all of them or none of them. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Put your hand up if you think it's a computer. You're wrong. I am that strange. But you know, if something walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it doesn't mean it's a duck, does it? And that's true of AI systems. Now here's another very famous thought experiment, the infinite monkey theorem. The idea is we fill this room with an infinite number of monkeys, we give them all a typewriter, we let them bang the typewriter over and over again. Eventually you get Shakespeare. Amazing, isn't it? Shakespeare. I was always sort of intrigued by that because I thought, okay, you might get a Shakespearean comedy coming out, but the real tragedy would be the monkeys couldn't read it. After all this work, they couldn't read it. And they couldn't read it because, well, first of all, they can't read. But even if they could read, Shakespeare talked about deep human values and needs, not about monkey business. Completely different worlds. Another way of thinking about this, if we jump forward, so that Emile Boral's theorem was done about 40 years before modern AI was invented. This thought experiment by John Searle was in the 80s. And what he did in this seminal paper was to think about how you could refute the Turing test. So what you've got to imagine in this is called the Chinese room thought experiment. You've got a room, and outside there's somebody who can speak Chinese. And they pass Chinese characters through a slot in the wall. Inside, there's a person who speaks no Chinese. But they've got reference books, they've got a database. They can look up the character and then scribble an answer and pass it back through the hole. The person outside the room believes there's some entity in there that understands Chinese. But of course, as John Searle says, they don't. They're simply a processor, a machine that is able to give the simulation. Jump forward from 1980 to 2020, and a very influential computational linguist, Emily Bender and her colleagues, here's another animal, said that we should think about these new forms of AI not as things that can be like us, but simply stochastic parrots. What she meant is that we have machines that can suck in lots and lots and lots of different types of content, and then if you prompt it, it will parrot out, probabilistically, a stream of words or images. She reminds us in this paper that, but even if it can do that, this parrot doesn't have any of our communicative abilities or intent. Now, I wonder what Sam Altman thought of this. Remember, Sam Altman is the guy who founded OpenAI. OpenAI produces ChatGPT. When he heard about Emily Bender's analogy, he said, okay then, I'm a stochastic parrot, and so are you. Have a little think a moment for you. I mean, like looking out at you, there's people who've lived some longer than others. Do you feel that what you're doing as you navigate your relationships, your world, that you are simply sucking in lots of data, and then if I prompt you with a word, mechanically you will generate a stream of output? Are you really a stochastic parrot? And if you are, how does that make you feel? That leads us to another animal, and this animal is a lion. And when you get a lion in the room, you usually have a philosopher. This is a very unpleasant philosopher. And he went to Swansea. By the way, if you didn't know, Michelle did say it, I'm from Swansea. And Wittgenstein came to Swansea University in 1947. He was probably lost. And no, it's a wonderful place, and you should come visit. Sponsored by the Welsh Tourist Board. He wrote a number of really interesting things about language and how we can think about language. And one of his most important insights was he wrote that if a lion could talk, we wouldn't understand it. What he meant is, a bit like the monkeys and Shakespeare, lions and humans are not the same thing. They come from completely different worlds. So even if they could use a shared language like English or Swahili, it wouldn't make sense. See if the worldview of the lion and of you are very different. Let's see if I can unpack that a little bit more. A few years ago, with my family, and it's nice to see Sam and his partner here tonight. Well done. You've come twice now. I will definitely buy you a drink at the end of this talk. We went to see this immersive exhibition, Van Gogh. Some of you might have seen it. It was down by the Royal Albert Hall. Incredible. At the exit of the exhibition, there was this robot that was precisely, and in my eyes, being a technologist, wondrously recreating the sunflowers. I stood there doing my job as an anthropologist, ethnographer, and I watched it, but I was more interested in the fact that most people walked past it. They didn't spare a moment to look at that amazing robot creating the Van Gogh picture. A few hours later, I went to see, in the National Gallery, just down the road, of course, one of the real Van Gogh sunflowers paintings, and people were crowding around it. There are lots of reasons why people are interested in the original and not at all interested in the robot. But the one I'd like you to think about is that people are drawn to that original picture because it's coming from someone like us, someone with deep emotions and deep experience, and you can see their energy etched through the very movements and the strokes of their brush. Just because the robot could recreate those incredible marks meant nothing to people, because the robot was like a lion. Well, in fact, we don't have lions here, but we do have something I would call AIons, so AI entities. And I would just like us to think this: if an AI can talk, then we won't be able to understand it. So here's the worrying thing. AI, it seems, is striving to become more and more like us, but perhaps the only way that we can have a relationship with AI is if you and I become more like it. You and I become assimilated into the AI world. So now, as we move into the next phase of the lecture, we're going to think about 3 types of assimilation. The first is scary, and there'll be blood and possibly tears. That's extreme assimilation, where people actually want to become more like machines by implanting things into their body. The second, and I can see you all sitting there, well, I won't be doing that in my life. The second will be a bit more, won't be so much blood, but there'll be more angst on your part, because it'll be a quieter, a more nuanced form of assimilation. And the last type of assimilation will be a sort of hybrid between the extreme and the quiet. So let's start with extreme assimilation. Anyone else remember when they were 6 cowering behind the sofa when these creatures in Doctor Who came on at around 6 o'clock on a Saturday? These are, of course, of the Cybermen. Cybermen would go across the universe and they would look for human life and other organisms and try to upgrade them, ripping out flesh and replacing it with metal, looking at the irrational, emotional brains that you have, pulling that out and replacing it with rational coldness. The Cybermen thought they were doing people a service, getting rid of all of this nonsense where people put ferrets down their trousers. When I was a bit older, this one petrified me too. This is Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek, and in this episode, he has been assimilated by an advanced intelligence called the Borg. And the Borg, their frightening phrase would be, "You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." And then you'd become part of a collective. Your individuality would be taken away and flattened. I do wonder sometimes about, are we becoming like that? Are we becoming people who are having our individuality, our voice, taken away? I'd like you to ponder if you've used any large language models to write an essay, or to write an email, or to draft a report. Have you sensed a flattening of your individuality as you see the text. Now, because this is a Gresham audience and very erudite and probably doesn't watch television, I thought I'd better give a little bit more of a literary example. So, I don't know, can you recognize who the person with the strange headgear is? Oh, maybe you're not as literary as I hoped. It's Margaret Atwood. So Margaret Atwood, okay, I had the real blessing to meet her a while back, and here she is about to control a drone, a flying object, using her brain alone, using a brain-computer interface. For copyright reasons, I'm not going to show you that bit, but just imagine Margaret Atwood, that incredible brain. Can you imagine what it did to the drone? It was fantastic. Margaret Atwood has written a number of fascinating dystopian books which show how there's almost a sort of inevitability that humans will want to be assimilated and connect with new forms of technology, be it digital technology or, in some of her books, biotechnology. So we've talked about science fiction assimilations, and Margaret Atwood does speculative fiction. I now want to jump into the real world and show you, and a trigger warning here, there will be some flesh, some real people who want to become more like machines. The first person I met like this, and I met him in 1994, was a guy called Stellark. Now, Stellark is a performance artist, a provocative artist. When I met him, he was demonstrating this contraption, which he called the ping body. And the way it worked was, you can see, he's got his body and he's put all sorts of attachments, hooks, wires, and then, as packets of information flow across the internet, and I watched this, right? His body would twitch. His body would respond to the digital pulses that were passing through a computer system. Right, hands up those of you who'd like to buy this system and have it attached to your body. Is there anyone?
Can we rent
Oh, there's always a market. We'll talk later. When I watched this in 1994, I thought to myself, A, this is very strange, and do I really want to be in this research field? And B, I wondered, would there ever come a time where most people were like this? And I have to say, I think actually we are. We haven't got all the electrodes attached, but if you walk around, tomorrow, you look at the streets, you look at your workplace, you'll see lots of people who are twitching and responding as pulses and messages pass through the internet onto their screens. So we might not have all of the wires, but perhaps already we are shifting towards becoming more integrated into the digital. That was 1994. Jump forward to about 2000. I was writing a book, and I wanted to interview some interesting people, and I interviewed these two people, Kevin Warwick and his second wife. I think his first wife left him because he was doing some really crazy things with technology. Kevin Warwick, who was a professor when I interviewed him in Warwick of cybernetics, it became very, very notorious, very famous, very provocative. And what he did was to put small electrodes underneath his skin, and he called himself the first cyborg. And these things could do various interactions. So you could stroke his forearm, and then somewhere in the world, his wife's necklace would light up. So strange, but again, making us think about, what is going to be our future relationship between technology and our physical bodies. So 1994, 2000, there are still people doing this today. And here's quite a famous one. This guy is Neil Harrobson, and he's got an implanted antennae in his head. And that antennae allows him to listen to the colors, to the visual spectrum in the room. So it converts the visual field into sound, and he picks up that sound through bone-conducting earpieces, a bit like you can buy now when you're listening to music. But look what he says. Instead of using technology or wearing technology constantly, we will start becoming technology. So the last three people we've seen are all sort of amateurs, DIY enthusiasts, trying to biohack their bodies. But there's an industrial scale activity that is trying to do this. So here is our favorite AI tech bro, Elon Musk, who is now gets a salary of $1 trillion or something. It's incredible. And he founded a company called Neuralink. At the end of the lecture, we'll see some of the positive ways in which the Neuralink technology is being used. But what you can see on the screen here is a robot which, if you've got very good eyes, you can see a very small needle. And the robot comes down over your head, and the needle implants a fascinating, highly precise implant into your brain. And the implant directly connects with wires to neurons in your brain. Now, we'll see some of the good uses of this kind of technology, but one of the drivers for Elon Musk is, well, he thinks that AI is going to beat us, so we should join it. And we join it, in Elon's mind, by having these implants in our brain and having access to all of the AI's abilities. Now, when I look at that surgical robot, I can't help but remember the Cybermen. And it scares me. Now, if you're interested in these ideas, these are books that I'd recommend you pick up and read. One is quite old, Mark O'Connell's. Alex Krotowski's has just come out. And in both of those books, you can get lots more insights into what drives these people to want to hack their body, and importantly, some of the tricky ethical questions. So let me just ask you, and you can raise your hands, if you could upgrade yourself and become more like a machine, have one of Elon's chips put into your brain so you could tap in to all of that AI, would you go for it? Just raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 3. 4. All on this side of the room, interestingly. So 4 people there are going to be upgraded. They're going to be better than the rest of us. What is that going to mean if we have 2 types of human? One fully upgraded, one with all this information, and another impoverished. Well, of course, that's happening already today. I spend a lot of my time in sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeast Asia, and the kind of things we take for granted, the information we have, the AI services we touch, the advantages that give as we're walking on down the street to send that last email, that's not available to the majority of people in the world. So this might be a big ethical question for us in the future. It's already a big ethical question for the world right now. So that was extreme assimilation. And I think you're probably all thinking, that's good, I'm never going to do that. I now want to think about everyday, quieter assimilation. In the first lecture, I put up a chart like this, and it had colors in it, and I asked you to tell me what you thought the color meant. So I didn't want to disappoint the 5 or 6 of you who came last time. Thank you for coming back. So I put up another chart. What I'd like you to do now is to turn to somebody, maybe somebody you've never met before. Check that they are human, by the way. It's possible that 1 or 2 assimilants have already come into the room. And just maybe say hello, and then say what you think this map shows. And you've got about 30 seconds. You can talk about anything else if you want. Make some noise. Okay, that was 30 seconds. Does anyone want to tell me what this map shows? Yes?
The Roman Empire at its largest extent.
The Roman Empire in its largest extent. Put your hands up if you had a similar answer. All right. Put your hand up if you had a different answer. And what was your answer?
The amount of technology in the different countries.
Oh, that would have been also a good answer, but the first answer was correct. It is the Roman Empire in 117 AD, which, well, you'd probably know more than me, but was the greatest extent of the Roman Empire. Now, Roman Empire, of course, the Roman army was strong. It did subjugate people, right? It marched in. But its greatest conquest was not because it had all of that weaponry and all of that soldiery, it's because it had assimilated the people it took over, right? It gave them new laws. It gave them famously roads that were straight. It gave them new forms of language and of culture. So what I want us to think about now is, okay, AI is not necessarily going to march into your life and take your job and, make you feel miserable and make you feel a second-class citizen. But your interactions on a daily basis with these services might impact the way you communicate and might impact the way you behave. So let's have a look at both of those elements. First of all, the impact on the way we communicate. Computers, I am a computer scientist, there's a confession. And it frustrates me that for decades, forever, computers have wanted us to accommodate their ways of communicating. We have to change to become more like them. So these systems, the one on the top left there on your screen, very familiar to all of us, right? You go on the phone and it says, welcome to name your bank or insurance company. Press 1 for this, 2 for this, 3 for this. You press 2, then it says press 1 for this, 2 for this. And after a while, you want to, swear, don't you? And you want to put the thing down. We've had to adapt and accommodate their way of interacting. Now, in the middle part of the screen, those of you who are the same age as me and can remember initial mobile phones, instead of having these amazing predictive text where it does all the work for you, you had to multi-tap to get the words you wanted. We were really like those monkeys, bang, 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 bang. And we never got Shakespeare. We just got little text messages. Again, we had to be assimilated into the computer's way of communicating. Did anyone have the thing on the bottom right? It's a Palm Pilot. Yeah, it was one of the kind of like first sort of smartphone-esque organizers. But again, it made us change the way we communicated. It couldn't do handwriting recognition like we do, or advanced systems do today. We had to learn this new script called graffiti. We had to adapt, accommodate, so we could communicate. And even though we now use natural language, there's lots of research showing that when you talk to your smart home device, your Google Home or your Alexa or to your phone, we are beginning to dance to the machine's rhythm as we speak. And indeed, there are even new jobs, right? So you could become a prompt engineer. It's a kind of like an AI horse whisperer. You know how to talk to this device, to coax it, to give it the right words so it generates the right output. We are becoming drawn, I would suggest, more and more into the AI rather than it becoming more like us. So that was communication. Let's think about how it impacts our behaviors. I'm going to show you 3 quite common impacts. I think all of you are behaving in this way, but let's see. 3 things. So the first one is called down the rabbit hole. So down the rabbit hole is where you get out your phone, and before you know it, you've spent an hour looking at your screen, scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. We're all friends here. This is AI Anonymous. So put your hands up if you've ever found yourself down the rabbit hole. Excellent. Those of you who haven't, keep away. Now, what's happening there? Well, the best way for me to explain it is by looking at one of the most successful apps driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence, TikTok. And what TikTok uses, it has an incredible amount of data about you. So it knows how long you are on any particular item of content. It also knows how quickly you flick. It knows, of course, what the video is about, and it has information even about you and where you're at. And here's the interesting thing. What it's doing is trying to optimize engagement. It wants to keep you looking at the screen. There's a fascinating study that shows that we do this because we get this kind of dopamine rush from the content, because it has been so tuned to engage you. And here's a really interesting thing about that study. You get the dopamine rush just before you swipe to the next screen. So your brain is anticipating a reward. We think, don't we, that we're so clever, we are exploring the world as we go down the rabbit hole. But I would suggest that actually AI, machine learning, is exploring you, trying to bring you into its orbit. That's behavior one. Behavior two, another very common one. It's called cognitive offloading. Put your hand up if you used a paper map in the last 24 hours to get from A to B anywhere. Hallelujah, there's someone fantastic. Good. Well, you're going to be one of the resistance, and we're going to need to rally round you in the future. Most of us don't, right? Because these are really useful. You know, you can find your way from A to B. You know how long it's going to take. You know which options you could take. But while accepting these devices are beneficial, we have to think about what they might be doing to our intelligences. This report published, was it last month? Yeah, I think just last month. Very, very authoritative report. And it's been tracking what's called the cognitive abilities and disabilities in a group of American adults over the last 10 years. And by cognitive disability, they mean your ability to make choices, remember things, plan. And what this tracking study has found is that there has been a decline in cognitive ability over that 10-year period. And here's the thing, it's not just for people like me who are older. The younger group, much younger group, are finding that their cognitive abilities are being eroded. Now, that paper, you should read it, gives lots of possible reasons for the decline. Some of it could be due to health or nutrition. It could be to do with people's economic status. But one part of the paper talks about the impact of social media, of us offloading some of our abilities to these devices. Now, whether or not that is actually going on, whether or not we are really rotting our brain, I think we also have to think about what we give up when we give over some of our abilities to the digital, to the artificial intelligence. So let's go back to the Romans and to their roads. Romans made roads. They were straight roads. They were great. They would allow you to get from A to B really effectively. Roman roads are also very, very persistent. So here's an example of a road in Britain which is built on an original Roman road. Sometimes when new infrastructure comes in, it lasts a very long time, and it remains as we become assimilated. These Roman roads are great, but what they've done is for us to forget other tracks, other ways of finding and journeying in our lives. So, for example, in the British Museum, if you go, you will see this famous, very, very ancient track from Britain. It's called the Sweet Path. Many things that were once part of our natural fibre and fabric in the UK have been forgotten as we've taken on these new forms of infrastructure. So a question to us all is, if we do give over to AI, forget about whether it rots your brain, but what are we losing? And how might we re-cherish those things? Now, the last behavior is one I think that there's no one in, well, maybe there is. There shouldn't be anyone in the room that doesn't resonate with this horror story. You're sitting with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and you're not there. You are doing what some people have called the death of proximity. So come on, let's be honest. Put your hands up if you've ever had a situation like that. You sat next to family, friends, and they all get their phones out, and you're not present. Let's have a look. Oh, yes. The rest of you, again, I need you in the resistance force. This is a very well-known impact. I want to go a bit deeper tonight, and we're going to go a bit deeper with the help of an anthropologist in UCL and his colleagues called Daniel Miller. And Daniel Miller said that what our smartphones are becoming are transportable homes. Now, what he and his colleagues meant by that is that we can now, or we feel, live our lives in these boxes. We can live in this digital space. And he calls it a transportable home because from my home here, I can transport into a friend's or a colleague's, wherever they are in the world. Now, Daniel Miller doesn't make any judgment of whether or not transportable homes are a good or bad thing. I want you to think that they're a bad thing. Because what we're saying, effectively, is inside this box is a sort of digital simulation of your life. And then you connect, you believe, through messaging, through Instagram, through connection, to someone else's life. But that also is simply a data-driven AI algorithmic force, not the real person that you and I are. So we've done extreme assimilation. Now we've done everyday assimilation. I want us to end by thinking about a merging of extreme with everyday assimilation. So this is my wrist, and I'm now going to tell you, all the way through this lecture, you've been talking to a cyborg. So I've tricked you, and I'm going to upgrade you, and resistance is futile. So I've not got anything implanted in me, right? I'm scared of blood. I'm not going to stick anything under my skin. But I am wearing something here that can pick up some very, very intimate aspects of my life. My heart rate variability, how much oxygen I can push into my lungs, my heart rate, my stress, all sorts of things. So that's like an implant, and then it connects to an app on my transportable home, and that app tells me all sorts of things. For example, it tells me that I should go to bed tonight at 7:46. So the last thing that told me to go to bed was my mother, and I was 6 years old, scared after the Doctor Who. It's a funny world, isn't it? Oh, here's Margaret Atwood again. Do you recognize her now? Yeah, good. So Margaret Atwood again, she's using, these are like the implants on your wrist. So what Margaret's using here is the first version of Google Glass, which were the glasses where you'd have a very small lens and you could see digital content. I asked her what she thought about it, and she said, rubbish. And she was right at the time, okay? But fashions have really changed, and these devices are becoming fashionable again. So this is Facebook's or Meta's glasses. You put the glasses on, and then you wear something like this on your wrist, and simply by picking up your muscle electric pulse, you can navigate through information that you see in front of you on the sunglasses. Take a look at some of the things that you might see through your glasses. These are all real examples of what Meta thinks you might use this sort of cyborg outfit for. So you're walking along and you see some tomatoes, and the AI pops up and says, that would be good for a recipe. Or you're looking at a quaint building, and the AI says, oh, just go around it, there's your destination. Or even, and this is all real, right? This is how it's been sold. You're sitting down with your friends and family over a nice meal like we'll be doing a bit later on, and as you two are talking, it transcribes everything you're saying so I don't miss a word. Have a look at those images. What is the most noticeable thing about those images? Yeah, so the digital is right in your face, and the reality is in the background. Really got to think about the future. Do we want a future where the digital becomes much more than the physical? It is foregrounded, whereas our reality, which is so glorious, is put into the background. So we've only got a few minutes left, so now we must end in hope. And I'm going to tell you that, first of all, that resistance, and I think we've got at least one member of the audience who's going to help me there, is useful. You know, when the Romans came and they occupied Britain, there were still poets. There were still people who kept the old traditions going. And that has lasted into our present day life. So you can, of course, decide to do a digital detox. You can buy a device that's very simple. I'm, though, the professor of IT. And if I tell you to stop using computers and throw them all away, I think Michelle and the worshipful company of IT will probably tell me, thank you for that second lecture, your time is up. So I'm going to tell you that the way I look at the world is that we need to think about reorientating rather than just resisting technology. And I want us to think about 3 ways we could do that as people who build technology. The first is through extreme empowerment. So instead of extreme assimilation, why not use AI to provide great empowerment to people? So here, for example, is a professor of MIT, Hugh Hare. He lost both his legs in a climbing accident. And then he put all of his research effort into creating prosthetics, which use incredible algorithms to allow him to walk and dance and move just as he could when he had legs. That's extreme empowerment. Remember I showed you Elon Musk and that horrible robot thing that put chips into people's brain? Well, Neuralink, his company, does some really great work. Nolan Darbar here had a freak accident and he became a quadriplegic. But he was the first person to have a Neuralink chip put into his brain. And you can see here, just by fluent thought, he can control, you might say it, a little small cursor and access the digital. He said, I am now the first telekinetic person. What about everyday agency instead of everyday assimilation? Think back to the example I gave you of navigating with your phone. A while back, my team, research team in Swansea, looked at an alternative to that heads-down, turn-by-turn interaction. We wanted people to find their way to a destination without being nannied to that destination. So you see here in this little clip, the person on the left is getting frustrated because he's being told exactly what to do, and the person on the right is getting very subtle touch information to allow them to meander and find their own way. And finally, how do we design so instead of having all of this stuff pushed in our face, we can feel like we're living in an uncurated world? For this, I would point you back to a very early mobile device, the iPod Shuffle. It's a device about this big by Apple. And what it would do, one of its functions was it could take and make you a random playlist. And indeed, its marketing was, life is random. People loved it because they were, although these tracks were being played randomly, they were using their curiosity, their thoughts, to work out why one piece of music was being played after another. Now, all of these examples, as we end, I would say I'm trying to get us to think about how, instead of us being played by AI, instead of us being made to dance to the rhythm and the tune of these new systems, being assimilated, How can we design systems so that we do the playing? I'm going to leave you with this image. This is an image of a virtuoso violin player. Look at her. She's got an instrument, the violin, in her hand. She's putting all of her energies, her physical energy, her emotional energy, her cognitive energy, into that instrument and creating an incredible performance for herself and for others. We need to stop thinking about AI as some entity that is either going to subjugate us or is going to assimilate us. We need to think more about it being something that is simply an instrument, another great tool that we can play our performances with. So, at the end of the second lecture, I can tell you, don't worry about being subjugated. Be careful that you're not going to be assimilated. But if you avoid both of those temptations, there's still one more, and that is that you'll feel domesticated. But that is, as they say, time for another lecture, and that lecture will be in February. And given that that lecture is after the new year, and there's a Christmas tree here, let me be perhaps the very first person to wish you Happy Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you.